It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
What are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better... Sheriff? Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
Hi, this is Carol King from Music City, and you're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles.
In the Torah, as Pharaoh and his Egyptian army chased Moses and the Israelites, they were led by a pillar of fire. It represented the presence of God. In 1492, Christopher Columbus saw a UFO on board the Santa Maria. He reported it later on the ship's log. He said it reminded him of a candlelight. He called his men up on the deck to come up and look at the strange light flying around. In 1831, during the Indian Removal Act, otherwise known as the Trail of Tears, strange balls of light were reported by those present. During World War II, fighter pilots called these strange balls of light Foo Fighters, and they would fly in formation with them. Most of the pilots were terrified of these strange balls of light. The lights go by many names. In Argentina, the will-o-wisp is what they call the balls of light, or known as evil spirits. On the border of Missouri and Oklahoma, there's an area locally known as the Devil's Promenade. It's an area where strange balls of light seem to appear. The locals call them Spooklights. In Texas, there's an area where you can go see the Marfa lights. At night, these strange balls of light fly around.
When you first start looking at them, you think they're car lights. But when they split up, one jumps this way and one jumps that way, well, it can make a believer out of you real quick.
There's also an area in southeast Texas called Bragg Road Ghost Light. It's a road that people go down, and they report seeing strange balls of light flying around.
My experience, when we tried to catch up with them, it seemed like they always stayed just a few steps ahead of us. We could never get real close to them. Maybe they do possess intelligence. Maybe they do. Maybe they know what we're doing.
There are reports all over the world of these strange balls of light flying around. They vary in appearance and color. Min is an unexplained light phenomena that has been reported in the Australian outback. When people describe seeing strange creatures on their property, like Sasquatch, they will also talk about these weird balls of light flying around. What are these balls of light that people are seeing? Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. We're going to be chatting with Damien Nott, who comes to us all the way from Australia. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk with him, this balls of light, whatever name people give them, they're seen all over the world. They're seen in the skies, they're seen in the forest. A lot of people have reported them now. A lot of people have reported them in the past, as I was talking about in my intro. But Damien seems to capture these balls of light. They seem to, and he'll call them UFOs, but they seem to be around this guy a lot. And there's a lot of skeptical people that have approached Damien and wanted to go out with him to prove that he was full of crap. And then they walk away with a ton of evidence. So I really want to chat with him about his life, why he thinks this is happening to him. I highly recommend on Amazon Prime, check out Australian Alien Skies. I think there's 3 of them. And I'll include a link to Damien's YouTube channel too as well. I'm definitely excited to chat with him tonight. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Damien to the show. Damien, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. And for most of the American audience, they may not know who Damien is. I remember I was telling you, Damien, before we went on the air, I was telling you I was watching that Australian Alien Skies, the show on Prime. If you go to Amazon and watch it, you'll watch what's going on with Damien. And I thought, God, I got to talk to this guy. And, it really started out, and I want to talk about your experiences too as well, Damien. But, here in the States, one of the things that I started coming across is I would interview eyewitnesses who have seen Sasquatch. And a lot of times, Sasquatch is on these people's property. And the way it kind of started out for me was people would go, oh, and by the way, I'm also seeing these weird lights. And at the time, I just kind of bypassed it because I was like, well, I can't speak intelligently about these lights. But it was time and time again, people would say it to me as an afterthought. They would talk about these creatures being on their property, and then they would go, oh, and by the way. And so I started asking people who had these things on their property before they got to that point. I would say, have you seen the lights? And there would be a long pause on the phone, and people would go, well, how did you know that? So there's this weird thing with these lights, and I kind of want to, and I've done shows about the lights before, about the Foo Fighters in World War II, and there's a long history of these lights, but I was so fascinated with you and what happened to you throughout your life, because you're in this weird situation to where you filmed a lot. I mean, you have a ton of evidence, and not only do you have a lot of evidence, but you also have a lot of eyewitnesses that are there with you that are like, hey man, I saw it. I thought this guy was full of crap. Yeah, they showed up. They were there. And I know you've told your encounters multiple times, and I know when it really started when you were 9 years old, but for the American audience who doesn't know anything about you or has never heard this before, do you mind telling us about your encounter when you were 9 years old?
Yeah, most definitely. Well, it was a Sunday evening, and I was on my way home from a friend's place and had my skateboard under my arm, and I was going up over a hill adjacent to my street. And as soon as I got to the top of the hill, I just had this strange feeling, almost, like the feeling like you're being watched, like someone's behind you, and you look around and someone's there staring at you, like in a supermarket or something like that. And I think we've all had that kind of feeling, a few times during our lives, whatever. But I looked up, and for some reason, instead of looking around, I looked straight up. And directly above me was a red ball of light. From what I remember, possibly about the size of a basketball, maybe a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit smaller. I was, only 9. But as I watched this light, I stood still for a few seconds, and then, I continued. I didn't know what it was. I was a bit inquisitive, but I didn't feel scared or anything like that at first. I just thought, this is unusual. And then I remembered that, Mum wants me home for dinner and I better get home, otherwise I get in trouble. So kept walking, and I looked up again, and sure enough, this light was directly above my head still. And so I was like, okay, that's a bit unusual. And, what do you do about what's going on? And So I kept walking, and as I was walking, I looked up to see if it was still there. And sure enough, as I was walking, it was moving as I was walking. And I remember stopping and looking and continuing to look up at it. And as I stopped, it stopped. And this happened for about, the whole sighting maybe lasted about 25, 30 seconds tops. So it was a relatively quick sighting. But as far as UFO sightings go, that's a long sighting. And but this happened where I would walk and it would continue sort of seemingly following me or mimicking my footsteps, my walking. And I would stop, it would stop, and then I'd continue, it would continue. And after a few seconds, I got on my skateboard as I'm going down the hill a little bit and looked up again, and it kept up with me. And I got this fear, and like it just hit me like really, really instantly. And so straight away, I grabbed my skateboard under my arm, ran the rest of the way home, ran through this park and ran up onto my street and didn't look back up again. And, you know, I was excited, but by the time I got home, I was a little bit scared, but excited. And I told my mum, I jumped the balcony in one leap. I was that excited. And I said, Mum, you're not going to believe what I just saw, you know, and what's that? And I said, oh, it was a red light. And she said, well, it was probably just an aeroplane. And I mean, even at that age, at the age of 9, I knew what an airplane was. I'd seen them in the sky before, so I knew what I'd seen. It was something strange, and so. But when you're young, you want to believe your parents, you know. And so I sort of wiped it off for a little while and said, "Oh yeah, okay, well maybe it was an airplane," and didn't think much of it. Then 3 years later, I was camping out with my stepbrothers, and it was a hot summer night. We're in the backyard and looking up at the sky, and we lying on top of our, you know, on sleeping bags and looking up, and next second this red ball starts dropping from the sky, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's kind of how we knew that it was getting closer. It was getting larger, and it got to a certain height, and then out of the corner of our eye we saw a blue light, like it's hard to tell at night time because of the height. You don't know how high they are. It's hard to tell the size, but this other light came in. It seemed to be smaller than the other light, but it got bigger as well and started chasing this light, the red light, around the sky. And they would travel fast distances and then stop at the blink of a hat, just like that, no forward inertia whatsoever, take off at a 90-degree left-hand angle, then stop over here. And while the red light's doing that, the other blue light is following it, chasing it, seemingly. That's what we thought at the time. And my brothers and I, we're amazed. We're going, what's wow. And I'm saying to them, that's what I saw a couple of years ago. And, you know, because I'd told everyone in my family, and, you know, and half of them probably thought I was crazy, but hey, you know, or I was just a kid, you know, inventing stuff or whatever the case is. But now I had my brothers witnessing it with me, and we called out my father, and he came out and looked up, and apparently he saw the end of it, the sighting as well. But while this blue light's chasing the red light, another light has come into play, and it was like a yellowy green color, and it was about the same size as the other ones. And anyway, they played this game of, you know, catch up, or whatever you call a game of tag, or whatever you call it, across the sky. And it lasted for about a good 8 to 10 minutes. And I mean, it was a really long sighting, and it almost seemed like the other two lights were keeping the red light away from us, because originally it was coming down close to us, like the first one did when I was 9. And you know, when you see something like that when you're a kid, it sticks with you your whole life. It really, like like right now, I'm remembering it in my mind's eye, exactly what happened, and it was just incredible. But after a while, these lights disappeared, and like the red one seemed to go off in some direction, and the other two chased it at angles like this, and they all disappeared at the same time. And there was like a little bit of a flash in the sky, and it was really strange, and it was gone. Anyway, after that, I decided, hey, there's something to this, because, you know, I was a little bit older, and I started reading a lot of UFO books from the library, or, you know, my mum she was into mysteries and stuff like that. And I remember the first book I ever read was actually a book on Bigfoot. I got it right here.
Oh, very cool. And the audience can't see it, but what was the name of it?
The Mysterious Monsters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so that sort of gave me like an interest in mysteries and stuff like that. But it wasn't until the sighting when I was 12 when I really started delving into the UFO side of the phenomenon, or the UFO phenomenon, I should say. And after that sighting, and really trying to find out what it was that I'd seen when I was 9 and what it was when I'd seen with my brothers when I was 12. And and affected them as well. Like, it's something that even in our adult years now, I'm 40, nearly 42 now, and for years, whenever we'd catch up, that'd be one of the first things that would come up. Oh, do you remember that when we were young and we saw that, and it still is a source of wonderment for my brothers and for me, So it was something that captured my attention, and it basically led me on a lifetime quest, I guess you could say, trying to find out what this was and where it comes from, and what it is and what it wants. And, and even went to a Catholic school. I was raised by strict brothers. And for most of my life, for the first half of my life, I went to very strict school. And I used to ask the brothers, after the sightings, like when they'd say that, we're the center of God's creation in religion class. And I'd put my hand up and say, well, what are the red lights that I saw? Or what are they God? Are they God, or are they other humans? Or And I used to I remember on 2 occasions when I'd asked that question on 2 different religion classes over a couple of years, I actually got kicked out of the classroom and had to sit outside the school principal's office to the end of the lesson.
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for. Yeah.
For being disruptive, and no one could give me an answer. So that drove me more to want to find out what it actually was. And hence, any book I could find, I would read and read and reread and reread. And, that pretty much launched me onto a lifetime of trying to find out answers.
Yeah.
On a quest for personal answers. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really like your story. And when I say story, I mean like what happened to you throughout your life. I really, the fact that you search for answers, and the lights, I've actually seen the lights on 2 occasions, and one was blue and one was white. And the blue one, it's very hard to describe the lights to someone because it's not like a bright light that blinds you. It's not like someone's shining a flashlight in your eyes. It's a real, and you might disagree with me, Damien. This was just my impression of it. It was a real pretty light.
Yeah.
And it was kind of an internal light. And it really wasn't something that, it was pretty to look at. I will say it was pretty to look at. It terrified me because I didn't know what it was. And, I grew up, I didn't grow up Catholic, but I grew up very religious. Do you have kind of in the back of your mind somewhere that this is demonic or the fallen angels, or because when you grow up with that, being crammed down your throat nonstop, it affects you even as you get older. You start to think, well, maybe these are demons, maybe these are. Did you kind of go through that growing up Catholic?
Not at the time, to tell you the truth. I actually, like everybody else, believed they were aliens from another planet. And that they were just visiting us and this and that. It wasn't until years and years later, and especially in the last maybe 3 or 4 years, I started to firmly more believe that there may be there's something. It's not as simple as aliens coming from another planet. Let me say that there is something. I think there are some parallels in the Bible. I think like the shaft of light that led the slaves out of the desert, and they followed it. Certain other stories in the Bible, they speak about strange lights and things like this. Everyone's watched Ancient Aliens, right? And you can sort of, where they link a lot of stuff together and all this sort of thing. I've tried not to, I've taken all that on board, but until I know myself, I can't really say 100% that it's this or it's that or it's this or that. I've had a lot of opinions on what it could be during my life, but I've never really settled on anything. And what I've always said is that, for 33 years now, I've looked into it, the phenomenon. And at first I thought it was aliens, like I said, but the more you look into it, it seems the less you actually know about the subject and the stranger it actually does get. Now, I've got a documentary coming out called Haunted Skies, where I go into a lot of the links and connections between paranormal phenomenon here on Earth and also what's happening above us, above our heads, and also in the Earth as well, because UFOs have been seen to fly into oceans. Excuse me, they've been seen to fly into ground. without affecting the ground whatsoever, without affecting the water whatsoever. And then there's a lot of cases that throughout history where this has happened. I've actually got it on film, UFOs flying into the ground at high speeds. I've got on film UFOs flying into the ocean at angles without making a splash. So whatever they are, they're not affected by our environment, by our gravity, by anything really. They seem to be cocooned in their own little, basically in their own little world. They can do what they want. There's a lot of theories that, they give off a high electromagnetic field, and this in turn ionizes the oxygen around them, which causes the glow around them as well. And so it seems like they are sort of in some sort of cocoon which separates them from our physics. There's a lot going on in the ghost phenomenon as well, and even it stretches over to the Bigfoot phenomenon too. A lot of Bigfoot has been seen around UFO sightings, around strange lights. There's one case I remember years ago where a bunch of children, I'm not sure if it was in Russia or America, but they witnessed a light or a UFO coming down over a forest at the back of their home, and then within and landing in the forest or whatever the case is, and then within a couple of minutes, a big hairy being comes out of the forest and stares at them, and then goes back into the forest, and this thing lifts back up and takes off. Now, it's strange because with the Bigfoot phenomenon, a lot of the tracks, like you'll follow tracks up mountains and and in the Himalayas, then all of a sudden the tracks will disappear out of nowhere, and like wondering where did they go? Where did it go? What happened to it? And the fact is none of them have ever been caught. Same as the big cat phenomenon as well. Strange, leopards and strange panthers that we've been seeing here in Australia. They seem to appear out of nowhere, then disappear. So that could be part of the high strangeness of the UFO phenomenon as well. There's the high strangeness part is what really gets me, because the phenomenon seems to affect equipment. It seems to be aware of us. The ghost phenomenon as well seems to be aware of us. There's a lot of connections between UFO and a lot of investigators on both sides of the field won't admit it or won't even look into that part of it.
You're
the connections.
Right. You're absolutely right.
They will not link them together. But the fact is, there's been reports of strange smells of sulfur around UFOs. Same as with the Bigfoot phenomena, same with the ghost phenomena. They appear and disappear in very similar ways. The ghost phenomena, balls of light have been seen around Bigfoot phenomena, UFOs, ghosts, strange balls of light traveling through walls, all sorts of different things like that. They're seen and picked up in the full spectrum and also in infrared. There's a lot of connections. I've come up with 28 connections for the next documentary that's coming out. And I don't want to say 100% that it's this or it's that or it's 100% all connected, but I do believe that they're coming from the same place. Now, whether that be in human terms, other dimensions or other realities that are existing alongside of us that we can't see, but I think dark matter has something to do with this, considering most of the universe is made up of, 80% dark matter. So they say. It's still a theory, but who's to say that dark matter is not where, these other realities exist that we can't exactly see, and they're coming from that place, but it's all around us. So, it's a really strange subject, and it's fascinating. The more you get into it, the more questions that come up. So
the less you seem to know, the more you get into it, the less you seem to know.
If you're honest, a lot of people aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and you're right.
A lot of people say it's this or it's that, and and they couldn't be further from the truth. It depends if they've got a book to sell or whatever the case is. But if you are truly honest to yourself as a researcher, you'll admit that you don't know what it is 100%. So no one can know what it is.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, and there's a lot of Bigfoot researchers here. It kind of sounds like they're a lot like the UFO researchers in your world. Some of the hardest people to get along with. Not everyone. I mean, there is some good people, but there's this weird ego, when it comes to these fringe topics, to where I have all the answers. I know everything. I.
Exactly.
And, they're delusional in thinking that. But what's strange is you'll hear a lot of these Bigfoot quote unquote researchers, and I hate the term researcher because it's like, what are you researching really? But they'll go out and they'll see these strange balls of light in the forest, but they'll say, well, we don't talk about that because we're searching for an ape. And this is, this is something.
Yeah.
But what's weird is most of them have seen it. I've talked to a lot of them privately, and they'll say, yeah, I've seen the balls of light. I don't know what they are. And they are throughout history. I mean, Germany, Norway, China, Canada, Australia. Australia has Min lights, in the United States, they call them Spooklights. They have all different kinds of names for them, and no one really seems to know what they are. And they do show up with this other strange phenomena regarding even Sasquatch. Not always. That's the part that throws me off. You won't get high strangeness beyond seeing something that shouldn't exist. Beyond that, you won't see that. But people who are around these creatures for a period of time, they'll talk about the lights and these weird balls of light flying around on their property. And it really got me to look into what is this thing. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized it's not really a new phenomenon that's going on. It's been seen for Christopher Columbus. He was on the Santa Maria, and he described them looking. He called a bunch of shipmates up, and they described them looking like a burning candle flying through the air, which would be a ball of light. That's he's using his verbiage at that time. The one question
they go back thousands of years.
Yeah, thousands of years. The Greeks talked about them. One question I want to ask you, when you say UFO, which is just unidentified flying object, U.S. military secret plane or whatever could be a UFO. Anything can really be a UFO.
Correct.
But there seems to be a difference, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not, I'm versed enough to talk about the UFO phenomena going on, but I'm not as well versed as you are. There seems to be a difference. People will describe seeing craft flying around. Like Travis Walton, to me, what he described was metallic, but it was almost like a mirror, almost like water that he was looking at, but it was a physical craft. These balls of light, do you think they're different, or do you think they're one and the same?
Well, they do seem to be a lot. Some of them, they come in different sizes, shapes, not just balls of light, but, shafts, columns of light. But the ones that are different sizes, I mean, there's a theory that I've seen ones, and I've filmed the ones the size of ping pongs. Red balls of light flying around that are the size of ping pongs, up to tennis balls, basketballs. I've seen white balls of light move across the tops of homes that are half the size of the home. Now, there's a theory that, as I mentioned before, that they're giving off some type of, or the actual, if there is a craft underneath, I hate using the term craft, but if there is an object underneath these balls of light, it's giving off some sort of, high electromagnetic field or whatever the case may be, which is ionizing the oxygen, causing the glow. So there's that theory. But, I mean, that doesn't it can't account for the balls that are tiny, like tennis balls or ping pong ball size lights that have been witnessed by many around the world, and flying through walls and doing all sorts of stuff like this. Now, there's a theory also it could be some sort of natural phenomenon that we have no idea about yet, some type of ball lightning kind of phenomenon. But these things seem to be acting of their own volition. They seem to have some sort of intelligence to them. They seem to be highly aware of us. And also they affect animals. They affect humans, obviously, not just by seeing them, but physical effects on humans too. Now, if these things are actually craft themselves, look, what most of the reports I get from around the world are reports of balls of light. Now, back in the day, they used to say it was about 82% of all reports of UFOs are balls of light. Now, it seems to have changed. Like back in the early days, there seems to have been a lot more saucer type reports that would come in, and so it's either the technology's changed, or it's gotten better, and it's more of a less physical type of craft now. It's more of a where they can pass through the ground and do all this sort of stuff. Not a metallic kind of thing anymore. Look, I've seen maybe 4 of them in my life, with witnesses. And so they're the rarest as far as I've seen myself. And according to my own calculations, I think they account for about 7% of all reports that I get over the last decade are solid metallic type craft. or ships or whatever you want to call them. And so that's a very small minority. But who's to say that they're not the same ones as the lights, except that they've when they land, they seem to not be balls of light. They seem to then turn into the ship type. So maybe when they're flying, they put this field around themselves that causes the glow, but doesn't account for the smaller balls of light. You can't imagine a tiny UFO the size of your hand with aliens in it flying around. So there's a theory that these things could be sentient creatures or sentient beings themselves. Some type of probe that's sent from the larger craft. I've got footage of large orbs up in the sky actually releasing smaller balls off into the atmosphere, and also I've got footage of these larger balls moving across the sky, sucking in smaller balls. Now, there's a great bit of footage from Hessdalen Valley of one of these balls or energies. Light energies moving across, sucking in balls of light. And I've got the same footage. So whatever these things are, they're up there. They're releasing smaller balls, and also the balls are actually flying straight back into them without them stopping, without, at high speeds. I've got them flying into these larger balls. Same as the cigar type craft that people see around the world. I've got footage myself of balls of light flying out of them, flying back into them. So there seems to be something up in our atmosphere which is ejecting these smaller balls of light. And maybe who knows what their mission is, what they're doing, what they're here to do. But they're the ones that seem to come down to the ground and seem to be seen by most people. So it is a mystery. And at the end of the day, all you can do is, judging by your own sightings and by your own footage, you can say, okay, well, they seem to do this and do that. But the big question is why, and where do they come from? And they're the questions that people really want to know. But all you can do is really talk about the characteristics. And this is what I'll be doing in an upcoming documentary of mine called Fractured Realities Part 2. I'll be talking about all the types of sightings in the skies, also the different coloured balls of light, the different sizes, shapes of, the different things we see basically in the sky. And I'll be talking about their characteristics, what they seem to do. Some seem to follow people, some seem to mimic people, some seem to chase other balls of light away from each other. It seems to be almost like a war in our skies, that like something's trying to stop, like red balls of light, for instance, getting close to humans, stuff like that. So it's very strange. So all I can really go on is what I've seen and experienced myself. I can't actually say that it's this or it's that, unfortunately, and that's still part of the mystery of this.
And I respect that. That you don't know. And it took me a long time to learn that more times people respect you when you say, I don't know. I really don't know.
It doesn't sell books though.
Yeah.
It doesn't sell books or movies though. People want to know an answer, but look, I'm honest, always have been, always will be. And I'll go to my grave knowing that, I'm not going to sell out and say, oh, it's this because I want to write a book, or it's this because I want to be in a movie, or so I know the answer, everyone, and be a cult leader kind of person or whatever the case is. There's a lot of people already out there like that. They're making a mockery of the UFO field and the paranormal field, and I don't intend on joining that club.
Yeah, no, I understand. And you're right, there is an intelligence behind them. The ball of light that me and my brother saw, and I filmed it by mistake. I won't bore you with the whole story, but one thing I can tell you about it is it seemed like the more we took interest in it, it took interest in us. And I didn't, people will go, well, it's a ball of lightning. This wasn't a ball of lightning. This was something and it followed us. We drove out of there, and I always tell people it wasn't a high-speed chase, but it was like we looked back and it was still there. We looked back and it was still there. It was bigger than a softball, but smaller than a beach ball, and it was blue. I recorded it with an infrared camera, so everything has that chrome green look.
Sure.
But the light itself was actually a blue, kind of a bluish light. It's just something to where, here's the other question I want to ask you, Damien, and you can go into it, and if you don't want to go into it, I respect that. A lot of times I'll talk to people who have Sasquatch on their property or these weird beings running around on their property. They'll talk about the lights. And then I'll ask them, is there anything weird going on in the house? Anything like paranormal or what you would consider ghost activity, for lack of a better term to it? And a lot of people will say, yeah, there has been some weird things going on in the home. Almost kind of, I won't go as far as say poltergeist activity, but, stuff flying across the room or what you would consider like ghost activity. Did you ever experience any of that throughout your whole life of seeing these lights and filming them?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yes, I have. I've actually filmed a lot of very strange paranormal activity, especially over the last few years. And it seems to come in waves, just like the UFO phenomenon. It comes and it goes. It may stick around for a day or two. Very strange things. In this house here, I had both my grandparents pass away. And my grandmother, after her funeral, my auntie actually came back to the house, opened the door, and saw my grandmother sitting in front of the sink, staring right through my auntie, and as if my auntie wasn't there, but she was staring at her. And all of a sudden, just sort of fades away. This is straight after my grandmother's funeral. She was seen in the kitchen. And I've had experiences myself where my own grandmother died years ago, and I was just about to go to sleep, and I was in a dark room, and I had this strangest feeling. I sat up in my bed, started bawling out, crying my eyes out, saying, Nan, I love you so much. And I don't know why I said it. I could just feel some presence in the room. And then I just lied back down, and that was it. And I went back to sleep. The following morning, about 7:15 a.m. in the morning, really early, I got a phone call from my grandfather, my step-pop, and he told me, your nan died last night. And my jaw dropped, and all I could say to him was, yeah, I know. I just knew. It was very strange. Now, that's a couple of strange things happen. I've seen what you would call these dark things flying around in this house here. My father's seen him as well. These shadows that tend to move behind me, or behind my father, or run down the hallway. I've seen a white figure actually on an angle, like almost sprint down into my father's room. And when I told him about this, what I saw, he came out and told me that he said, thank you. And I said, why's that? He goes, that's exactly what I've seen twice in my room, standing at the end of my bed, looking at me. And I was like, exactly what I described to him. Very strange. Yeah, we've had like red balls of light in this house as well, flitter around, and I've got one on a really good, image of one actually going through some mesh and coming out the other side and flying up into the sky. And it was the size of a ping pong, but it came out the front door. Strange things like that. Also, things flying off the cupboards. Things that have been sitting in the cupboard for years in the same place, all of a sudden fall down and then smash a whole bunch of other things, and things fly across the room onto the floor, and then something else fly onto the floor as well and land directly on top of like a plate or something. Really strange coincidence. Bags fall over that have been sitting up for like years in the same place, really heavy army bags, just fly over. And it seems to be when I'm like angry or emotional, it's really strange when these things happen. It's been a whole bunch of other things. We've caught ghosts. I was at Maitland Jail a few years ago, which is, they have haunted ghost tours there here in Australia. And I was in the back row, and I was actually giving a presentation, but I was watching a friend give her presentation at this particular occasion, and had a lady in front of me, and she leaned back and she said, you know what's behind you, don't you? And I said, because I've had other people say I've got aliens behind me or whatever the case is, and, I don't 100% believe that, but I had a full spectrum camera in my hand at the time. And so without even looking back, I just took 2 photographs. And after I did that, I looked at the camera, and sure enough on the camera, there's this thing standing behind me, and it's forming like this big white, like you couldn't see arms, but it was kind of like you could almost see like a head, small shoulders going down to the ground, bright white glowing mist, you could say, right in the middle of the picture in both the photographs. And in the second photograph, it seems to be forming a head with pointed ears coming up, or horns or ears or something. I'll send you the photo. It's very interesting. And no one has been able to explain that to me as of yet. And at that same time, I had a lady who was at the back of the room also taking photos just before I took those 2 photos, and she caught a ball of light coming down from the ceiling inside this jail and then landing right where this thing formed behind me. So, very, very strange stuff. I've recorded a lot of stuff. We sent it to paranormal investigators over in the States, and they can't explain it either. A couple of the photographs and film that I've taken, they said, it's a parapsychologist said that it was some of the best stuff he's ever seen. And so this is why, with Haunted Skies, I'm linking up a lot of paranormal phenomenon with other phenomena that's taking place around us, such as, the Bigfoot phenomenon, not so much, but more so the UFO phenomenon and the ghost phenomenon, because there's a lot of characteristics that are very similar. And I believe they're coming from the same place, appearing, disappearing. I don't believe that UFOs are all coming from another planet. I believe they're around us at all times. I believe they're in our oceans. I believe they're good possibility. There's possibly some of them are coming from other planets. Who knows? Maybe back in the 70s, 80s, some of those cases. But the main excuse that skeptics use is that, the whole light speed thing, that we can't travel the speed of light. So, by the time any intelligent alien race would get here, it would take millions of years, all that sort of stuff. Well, no, I believe that they're all around us at all times, this phenomenon. And I believe that it's been intrinsic in human history, and it's been around us since the dawn of time, possibly observing us, watching us, just like a scientist would, if he created life in a beaker, if he created some bacteria, he'd watch it, but you don't jump in with it and live with it all the time. You keep an eye on it, and it feels like with the UFO phenomenon, that's what they're doing. They're keeping a close eye on us, and for some reason, certain people more than others. And that's, who knows why. That's one of the mysteries of this.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that, why it seems to be happening to you. And what I find fascinating about your situation is, even when I was watching Australia Alien Skies, I'm saying it wrong, but I'll throw up a link.
Just Australian, yeah.
Yeah, with alien at the end, but it's on Amazon Prime. And I've watched other things that you have posted, and I can be skeptical at times, but I remember sitting there thinking, this guy's not lying. I mean, he needs to quit doing that. If he's lying, he needs to quit doing this and go work for Hollywood. Some of the stuff this guy's filmed, he needs to go work for Hollywood.
I'd get paid more.
He'd get paid a hell of a lot more, man. And I was kind of curious, why do you think, can you pinpoint anything that happened to you prior to that first sighting when you were 8 or 9, when you saw that red ball of light? Was there anything that happened to you in your life prior to that, and then this happened?
Okay, that's a good question. Great question, actually. I had Look, a lot of people have rough upbringings, but most people who have rough upbringings don't see this type of phenomenon, So I'd love to use that as an excuse and say, I had a rough upbringing or whatever the case may be. I had a mother who was mentally ill. She had a lot of problems, grew up in a bad household, so to speak. And, but so do millions of people around the world. But most people don't see this phenomenon. So I've had to rule that out. So is it something about me? Is it something about my brain, the way I think? Is it, it's like my mate Mike, who's an author, he's a Fortean expert and researcher, and he believes that they are attracted to me for some reason. And for years I've put that back and said, no, they're not. It's just I'm lucky. I look up at the sky, or
it's more than luck, man. That's more
weird
than
stuff
luck.
happens, Yeah, well, like for years I sort of fought against that, and but the more stuff that happens, it gets to a point where, look, coincidences don't. There's too many coincidences for it to be a coincidence, so to speak. It just continues to happen, and for whatever reason, I seem to. I know it sounds strange, but Mike and others who've investigated my case have seen that I seem to affect electronics for some reason. I seem to drain batteries. I seem cameras, Gee, wow. Mobile phones charge in my hand, and I've got this on multiple videos in front of multiple people without being plugged in. And this is only on certain times. It doesn't happen all the time. It's very strange. And a lot of things break, computers, televisions. Within weeks or months of me having them, they all die in the same way. Just go black and die, and nobody can explain why or how. I've gone through 24 to 26 mobile phones in the past 8 years. They all die in the same way. And these are the ones that I can seemingly charge with my hand. I know that sounds crazy, but we have multiple videos with multiple witnesses seeing this happen. And I can't explain that, like anyone else would get a big head about it and go, oh, wow. But for me, it really angers me because it costs a lot of money, to replace all this equipment. And I'm not making any money off my talks or presentations or my documentaries. I refuse to. You know why? Because I remember growing up as a kid and reading all about the UFO phenomenon and skeptics jumping on and saying, oh, he did this, he did talks, they wrote a book, so he made money out of it or whatever the case is. So therefore, his whole story is full of it. I didn't want to be one of those people. So as soon as my story went public, after I had some investigators come into town here 8 years ago, actually back in 2012, 9 years ago now, and they came into town, witnessed the second they rocked up into town, they witnessed a UFO fly low with my father and I directly over the house here and during daytime. And straight away, the lead investigator, his mind was blown. It's very rare that you get called to a case of UFOs getting spotted in an area, and then you rock up and there's one instantly going over the house of the person who called you up, who called the investigators up. And and then the following night, 9 of these investigators, including family members, actually witnessed a UFO stop above the head after a torch was shown above it onto the UFO. And it was a ball of light, multicolored lights that were, flashing on and off. And it just stopped and stood in the sky for 3 hours in the one spot with the lights off. So it was busted, and so it tried to hide or whatever the case is. And then UFO presidents would come into town, of these groups, different groups around Australia. Every single one of them saw UFOs with me, not just one, but multiple UFOs, and filmed them with me in the backyard. Also, Sun Herald reporters, which is a pretty prestigious newspaper here in Australia, they happened to be told about my case by one of these UFO presidents, and they asked if they could come up into here, and I said, yeah, why not? And have a bit of a sky watch or whatever in the backyard, and they thought it was an interesting story. And sure enough, within about 5 minutes, the lady, Mariana Flynn, who was the president of UFO Research New South Wales, she said to me, can you get your friends to come? And I thought, oh, they're not my friends, but I mean, friends up in the sky sort of thing. But I thought, oh, okay, well, look, I'll just put it out there. And I thought, guys, now would be the perfect time to come. And sure enough, within about 5 seconds of me thinking that, we've looked up in the sky with the 2 Sun Herald reporters here. One's a very well-known reporter and his cameraman. And sure enough, 2 UFOs have come over the house within that 5-second period, playing a game of catch-up in the sky. Like they were playing a game of tag with each other. One would move like 2 white, large balls of light very low. One would speed ahead, then the other would catch up to it, then the other one in front would speed ahead again. Like they were playing a game in the sky, like kids would play, like a game of touch, It was really unusual. And straight away, the reporters had never seen anything like it in their lives. And so they asked if, they could come back the following weekend after they did another story just out of town on the way back to Sydney and have another sky watch. And so, but they did come back, but we didn't get the chance to have a sky watch. But they put me in the paper, and I said, "Look, I'm only going to go in the paper if you guys admit that what you saw." And sure enough, they did. They admitted in the newspaper what they had witnessed with me in the backyard, and it was 2 balls of light, changing speed and doing all this sort of stuff, and it was incredible. And then and this happened time and time again. At the moment, I'm up to 186 witnesses in the last 9 years who've seen the phenomenon around me, including multiple family members. My father's seen a lot of them. Friends, other family, people from around the world who've come to town here have seen them. with me. It seems to be, I've seen them on the way to conferences that I've spoken at. I've seen them on the way back from conferences. I've seen them on aeroplanes, following the aeroplane that I'm in, and got them on video, and other people in the planes have seen them as well. And so when this happens constantly, you could either get a big head about it and think, oh, I'm really special, or it breeds humility. And I've always been, a very, I've always been, what's the word? Humile. I've always had my humility about myself. I've never had a big head. I've always thought that, look, whatever it is, it's, it doesn't mean that I'm special. I'm just lucky to see it, and I've always had that attitude. And I think that's very important to keep that attitude, because a lot of people who do see the phenomena, even once or twice, so I've seen people who've seen one light in the sky and they think they're Jesus. And,
yeah.
Yeah, I kid you not.
Yeah, no, I believe you. Trust me, I believe you.
I've actually, over the years, people have thought I'm Jesus, that I'm Satan, I'm the second coming of Satan. I actually have over in America, there's an ex-professor from, I think, Ohio State University or somewhere like that. He used to be a professor there. He's writing a book on me. He believes that I'm the second coming of Satan. And I kid you not, he's writing a book, and he claims to have evidence that and I'm like, show me the evidence, please. I would love to know, But yeah, I mean, it's really strange. So
yeah, don't worry about that crazy Yankee. Probably no one's going to read his book anyway.
Probably not.
No, I think it would be more of a curse. I know you're a humble guy, and I
see that sometimes. I feel like that sometimes.
Total
it is a bit of a curse.
Yeah,
it's cost me friends. It's cost me family. Even relationships. You get into a relationship with somebody, and you got to hide your true self from people. And I'd hidden it from most people most of my life. And as soon as you open up to people about it, you get the old eye rolls, and and they sort of don't talk to you again, or you never hear from them again, or whatever the case is, or you're instantly the crazy guy. And what's driven me is my experiences and the pain it's caused me in my life, and the pain that I know that it's caused other people that have come forward over the last 100 years, that have been ridiculed, had their lives destroyed, their jobs destroyed. I can't find work. The reason why, they look up your social media account or look you up on the internet nowadays, and no matter how much I try in my line of work, nobody will seem to want to hire me, because as soon as they find out what you do or what you claim, you're an instant nutcase. And I'm part of what drives me is trying to change that attitude in society, because this is real. It destroys lives. And the government, has been ridiculing people for many years who've had these sightings. There's been a campaign of ridicule going on for many, many decades about the phenomena. It seems to be changing a lot nowadays, which is great, but to a point. But, what drives me is my own personal pain and my own experiences. So.
Yeah, well, I would encourage these people to look at your evidence, because I was shocked when I was sitting there watching video after video after video, and I mean stuff that you couldn't. Like I said, if you should be working in Hollywood if all this is BS, and I don't even know that Hollywood could do some of the videos I've seen you do, and it's strange too, because you'll have people show up with you, people who think you're full of crap, and all of a sudden they're seeing it too. And it really makes me wonder if, and I don't know how much I buy into regression or being hypnotized. I don't know that I could be hypnotized, not because I'm somebody special, just because I have an attention span of a 3-year-old. So I don't think that I probably could be hypnotized. But have you ever thought about something like that, to maybe find out, did something happen to me that I'm not aware of right now?
I have, great question again. Yeah, I have thought about it a few times, and I've been asked by a few people if I'd like to be hypnotized, but there is a lot of danger in hypnotism. You can be easily led. There's a lot of other false memories can be brought up. There is, especially if you're doing it with individuals within the UFO community, because they see there's a few individuals who do hypnotize people in this field who tend to want to steer you in a certain direction. Like there's one individual who's famous for hypnotizing people in the world here in Australia, and all around the room where she hypnotizes people, a bust of alien heads, and pictures of aliens on the wall. So the last thing the person sees as they're being hypnotized is a big alien bust of an alien head right in front of them. So that's, in a way, leading them into, oh, yeah, it's alien or this or it's that, whereas their original experience may have been in a dream and they're looking for an answer for that dream, but yet they're being led down this alien path through, seeing something before the last thing they see before they, are hypnotized or put out or whatever the case is. And, so they go down that route and they're much easily suggestible and much easily led. And, I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want to, maybe something might have happened to me. I don't remember, but I have had dreams myself. I've had dreams of being on a craft stuck on this black goo, and there was 8 other humans around a circle. One woman who looked like Kim Basinger in the 80s, when she had that long curly hair, and it was really so real. I could feel coldness in the dream, and there was little beings walking around the perimeter of this, what you call a craft, and there was little bay windows that they were walking past. Everything seemed so real. And I woke up with 2 marks on my left leg, and really strange marks as well, like spider veins in a circle, one larger than the other, and really bizarre. And a couple of months later, I had another weird kind of sexual dream almost with this weird elf-looking creature on a bed. And in the dream, I remember seeing through it. I knew there's something wrong about this. And I remember thinking in the dream, no, this ain't right. I could smell things in the dream. I could smell this like detergent-y, strong smells, really unusual. And there was this elf thing on the bed, and it was naked with its legs open, sort of like arched back with its legs sticking up. And where the vagina should be on a normal woman, there was this big open, like almost a rectangle that you could see up inside of. And I'm like, and it smelt strange and everything was wrong. And this thing, the second time I sort of said, no, I'm not doing this. The thing looked at me with these pointy ears, like it was like a human, like an elf out of Lord of the Rings. It was really bizarre. And it looked at me and it was really confused and angry that I could see through it, or I didn't want to have sex with it, or whatever the case. It was really strange. And then I woke up in my bed with the same 2 marks on my leg, and this was about 4 months later. Now, that is really strange in itself. I've never said that I've been abducted or anything like that. Look, the way I see it is that anybody who, just say you're a garbage man and you spend all your life picking up garbage, of course you're going to dream one day about driving around in your garbage truck because it's in your subconscious. Yeah. Right. So I've researched this for 32 years and looked into it. So, of course, one day I'm going to dream about it, obviously. Right. But what I can't explain are the 2 marks on my legs, which I woke up with. And I took photos of them, showed my father and other people, and no one could explain them because they were just really strange looking things. And but yeah, there's stuff like that. But I tend to put that aside. I try and concentrate on more evidence-based material than anything, something that I can actually prove. Because both those times I woke up in my bed after a dream. Now, most abduction experiences happen in the dream state. Now, I mean, if that's by design, who knows? But I do believe it happens. I do believe that it's a real phenomenon. And, same as like sleep paralysis. That's something that I'm fascinated in as well, because I've had that a few times and I've seen alien heads appear, floating in midair right in front of me with big almond glowing orange eyes. And while I'm being held down and can't move or talk or, and really petrifying dreams like that experience is another thing that runs the gamut all throughout history. Same as the UFO phenomenon and the abduction lore and folklore like fairies and elves and all this sort of stuff that we used to see. Who's to say that the fairies and elves that our ancients and elders spoke of was an earlier, type of abduction experience, or they appear in a certain way to calm us down, to make us, think, they're harmless or whatever the case is. And so there is a trickster element to this phenomenon, and it runs the gamut in all throughout the phenomenon. There seems to be some trickster part to it. So, and that's what makes me think, look, is all of this actually happening, or is it really just a figment of your imagination? And this is why a lot of people go crazy who experience this phenomenon. They really literally end up in mental homes. And it's sad. I've spoken to a few of them, and they're nicest people you could ever meet. If they had experiences that are so out of this world that other people, such as psychiatrists or whatever, believe that they're absolutely insane, and they can't be around normal general people. But this is run all throughout history. There's folklore going way back that could be construed as the UFO phenomenon or alien phenomenon or whatever the case is. Like I said, I don't believe they're coming all from just other planets. I think they're here, they're interacting with humans, and they have been here for many, many thousands of years, possibly interdimensional, in planes of existence, existing right next to us or near us, whatever the case is. This is why some people can feel ghosts, feel strange, phenomenon, whatnot. And so, yeah, it is very strange. I mean, we could talk all day about this. I mean,
yeah, no, and I appreciate sharing it. I know the dreams are very private, but I appreciate sharing it. And you're right, it does go back to ancient history. I mean, even the Sumerians, the term fairy isn't a Disney character, Tinkerbell, flying around. The Sumerians talked about them flying around in flying machines, and they would kidnap people. And there was sexual encounters, there was other examinations, there was all kinds of things the Sumerians talked about. Yeah. And then what they would do is they would drop you back off and make you forget about what happened to you. And the Sumerians talked about it. And, Sumerian culture is pre-Egyptian culture. And exactly. They talked about these things flying around. One thing I found fascinating about one of your dreams that you talked about when I was talking with Travis Walton, the Fire in the Sky, he fought off these gray beings that were trying to hold him down on the table, and he ended up leaving the area where he was at. He ended up on, and I asked him, I go, do you think you were like docked with another ship? And he goes, yeah, I think I was. But he ran into kind of like what you described, forgive me, Kim Basinger, I think you're wonderful, but it was a beautiful woman. She had blonde hair, blue eyes, and she was just gorgeous. And he ran into these other beings that looked very human-like. They never spoke to him. They just kind of took him by the arm, because the whole time he's telling them, hey, we got to get out of here. He's thinking they're with him. And he's like, we got to get out of here. And he described to me, he said there were some of the most beautiful humans, human-like, what you would think, could be models on our planet. Sure. And they never spoke to him. It's bizarre. The whole subject is bizarre. It makes me wonder, and I know you don't want to go down the religious path, but do you think sometimes going off of the whole story of the fallen angels and how they came down, and kind of the storyline is kind of the same what we hear today, if you believe that? Some people think it's all nonsense, and I respect that, but of giving us technology, taking people, creating human hybrids. Do you think there's, again, there's nothing new under the sun. Do you think it's all interconnected? Do you think all this weird stuff that we see going on is kind of like what was going on in the past? They called them angels. They could have, fallen angels. They could have, we call them aliens. We call them, we have different names. Every culture has a different name. That's just a name
that we use nowadays for them. Yeah, I think they've been all throughout history, and during those times in history, they described them the best way that they could at the time with the knowledge they had at the time. And look, there is a good possibility that some of these things, these fallen angels, look, one of the things that has connected a lot of the phenomenon over the years is the smell of sulfur. The smell of sulfur coming from, spaceships, from balls of light, from ghost phenomenon in homes, really pungent odors, and that to me, I mean, the first thing you think of when you hear the word sulfur is hell, because it's sulfur and brimstone and, that kind of, a thought that comes up. You think, okay, well, that does sound a bit strange. It does sound a bit biblical. I was actually speaking to someone about this yesterday, very deeply, a religious person, and she was agreeing with me as well that some of this phenomenon does seem to correlate with a lot of the stuff in the Bible and a lot of stuff about the Nephilim and the fallen angels. And And also even earlier you were speaking about the Sumerian culture, about, they had Enki and Enlil, and they had a hand in creating humans, and one wanted to help the humans while the other one didn't. And it sort of almost parallels to, God and Satan in the Bible in a way, that they had a hand in creating us, and one wanted to show us certain wisdom while the other one wanted us to learn on our own, and grow on our own, and whatever the case is. And so, look, there's a lot of different parallels going throughout history, and depending on what decade you're in, what century you're in, it seems to change. But the phenomenon, not the term seem to change, but the phenomenon itself seems to run throughout history. It seems to be the same type or a very similar type of phenomenon. And I think, like you were saying with the fairies and with the old cultures, and they describe certain beings abducting humans and that. I live in an area just not far away from here. There's a place called Cooler Tops National Park, and the place is actually quite famous. There's a big plaque in there, and it describes a legend of a god, an Aboriginal god. And these are legends going back, tens of thousands of years in the Aboriginal culture. They used to see a being in a ball of light that would cruise along the treetops. Now, one day there was seven women from one tribe, and they decided to climb the trees and right up to the top of the trees, because there's very large trees out there, like very wide ones, ancient kind of forest it is. And anyway, these ladies from this Aboriginal tribe would climb the trees to I think the god's name was Baikal or something, God. Well, that's how they described him, in a ball of light, right? So they climbed the tree to get a better view of him. One night, they all disappeared. They were all taken by him, and they were taken by him up into the stars, and they became the Pleiades star system. That's an Aboriginal legend. They became the Pleiades star system. One of the stars in the Pleiades is very dim, and they describe this as one of the women who climbed up wasn't as pretty as the other women. So she became the dimmer star than the other women. So there is legends of these beings or these gods flying around in spheres of light, which are spoken about in Aboriginal lore, abducting, as we call it today, abducting women, taking them off into space, never to be seen again. And the Aboriginals equated that to, they become a Pleiades star system. Maybe that didn't happen like that. But, that's what they thought back then. And they used the terms and they used the, but the fact, that, okay, abduction law, going back several thousand years in Aboriginal culture, they're talking about beings of light and women climbing to the tops of trees, getting taken by these balls of light with a god inside them. So,
yeah, it's fascinating you say that, because even the Native Americans have that same type of story. There's a phenomenon that happens over here in the U.S. It probably happens in everywhere, even Australia, where they talk about the little people. And they're little tiny beings. And if you talk to some of the tribal elders, they'll tell you those beings fly around in those balls of light. These little people will fly around in these balls of light. Most of the Native Americans will tell you it's an evil spirit. Stay away from it. It'll lead you to your death. If you follow a ball of light in the forest, it'll lead you off to your death. And us all being humans, I think we base our ideas and thoughts off our own experiences. If you have a very aggressive Yowie encounter and it's trying to kill you, you're going to think all Yowies are trying to, every one of them's going to kill you. That may not be the case, but I think they're just trying to describe what they're seeing. It is fascinating about the Aboriginals, because the Native Americans have something very similar. I mean, they'll call them water spirits. Most Native Americans will tell you they're spirits, over in the United States anyway.
Sure. Yeah, see, I mean, that's spanning different continents, different hemispheres. You've got Aboriginal type tribe speaking of virtually the same thing. I mean, that's got to tell you there that either they're somehow making up the same similar stories, or these things actually happen to them. And that's the best way they could describe it at the time. And that's carried on through history till nowadays, as their stories and as their, beliefs and whatnot. So it's funny you mentioning about how people following balls of light, and being warned not to follow these balls of light. There's multiple cases where people have actually seen balls of light appear near them, and have heard voices in their head saying, do not touch it, or you will die. Don't touch the ball of light, or do not follow the ball of light. And so whether that's, some sort of communication from the ball itself, or, and it's got to make you wonder too, if the people that did follow the balls of light into the forest or into wherever, and they never came back again, were these people abducted instead of killed? But back then they didn't know about abduction, so they just assumed that these people had died or whatever because they never came back. And so there's a lot of questions. It's quite interesting, but the phenomena itself, it's something that's ever present, and it's still here today. The same phenomenon that's been appearing for thousands of years, and you can, after you strip away all the side conspiracies and this and that and what it could be or could not be or whatever, you're still left with a core phenomenon. And that's what I'm interested in, is capturing, documenting, and getting as many witnesses to that core phenomenon as possible. I try and steer clear of the conspiracies and all that, the Men in Black and all this sort of stuff myself. But, I have researched it and I have found it quite interesting. But to me, the phenomenon itself is more interesting than anything. And that's what I believe people need to concentrate on, is, photographing, filming the phenomenon. At the end of the day, no matter how, good a camera you have, a lot of people say, it's blurry, or there's no sources, or this or that or whatever. No matter what you have, how great a camera you have, you can have a $20,000 camera, you're still only going to zoom in on a ball of light that's only going to be a little bit clearer than a $50 camera. It's not going to tell you anything about the phenomenon. It's not going to tell you what it's doing, where it's from, what it's about, what it's going to do. It's just you have a slightly clearer picture of a ball of light, and that's it. So I'm not interested in capturing the clearest and best footage ever, because you don't see
you
that.
You got some pretty clear footage, man. I would give yourself a little more credit, man, because you got some pretty. I mean, I was impressed by it, and I was like, man. And I was telling my girlfriend at the time, something happened to this guy. I mean, they had to. Yeah, you say that though, man. But I mean, and you've captured some very compelling, very, very compelling lights in the sky, things. Even like I think I saw one of your videos, and it kind of reminded me of like a humanoid flying in the sky. And that I think almost I say over here in the United States, like it's that big of a deal. I'm sure they've seen it in Canada, Russia, everywhere else. But even beyond balls of light, you've captured things that, to me, almost appeared to be like a humanoid like a black humanoid in the sky. Maybe it was a shape that reminded me of that, but it was a little more than just the ball of light.
Yeah, well, it says humans, we tend to make patterns out of things, out of like, you look at the moon and you see the man on the moon in the eyes, or you look at a rock and you might see a face in a rock, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, look, there is a lot. There's not just balls of light out there. There are a different variety of phenomena, you could say, I guess, that I've been lucky enough to capture. And, but predominantly it has been just different multicolored sizes and, colors of balls of light, predominantly. But then you've got these really strange ones as well that do and can look rather humanoid, i.e. in their shape. But I've captured ones that seem to change shape constantly. In constant flux, one strange thing years ago, I think it was on my 21st birthday, on the evening of my 21st birthday, and I think it was just before midnight, and I actually went out and visited my mother, and and just to see how she was, and for the night, and it was just about to turn the 16th of February on my birthday, and I've gone outside and I've looked up and I'm like thinking, another year's gone, and I'm about to turn 21, and about 10 minutes ago, and all of a sudden this egg has appeared above me, a glowing egg. And it was orange, and it was quite large, and it was very low. And it had, you could see inside of this thing, and I've never seen anything like it since. You could see inside this thing. It had red, almost what we as humans would describe as plasma, moving around inside in constant flux inside this egg-shaped orange ball, orange, like football, like an American football kind of shaped thing with like small rounded edges. And it stopped directly above my head. And then it kept moving along. And I was like, oh my, it's right on my birthday. This has happened multiple times, but it wasn't on my birthdays especially. It's really strange. Either before I turn midnight or up to 20 minutes after midnight. I've seen them multiple times with multiple witnesses. It's really strange. But this one especially, I didn't realize up until probably about 3 years ago, where I was on the internet and I got sent some report, and it was MUFON speaking about a case at Quakers Hill. And this is where I was. So I started reading it, and I read the date, and I'm like, what? That was seen, the same thing that I saw was seen by 9 other witnesses on that very night in Quakers Hill, doing the exact same thing, moving across the sky, stopping, moving, stopping, same description, same everything. Now, some people said they saw humanoids inside this thing. I never saw humanoids. I just saw this constant flux, red plasma, I guess, in constant flux. But some people said they saw beings inside this light. And I mean, so yeah, different people see different things. You could be at a skywatch and 5 people will see the same thing, and then 2 people or 1 person will see something completely different or not see anything at all. And it's right here, and you're all looking at it, filming it, or whatever the case is, and everyone's pointing at it with lasers, and 1 or 2 people won't see it, or will see something completely different and draw something completely different. Now, that's another part of the high strangeness of this phenomenon. It's really unusual. No one can explain that either, why that happens. Now, whether it's effect on the human mind, or certain human minds can process things in different ways, or whether it's you're open-minded enough, or whatever the case is, I'm not sure. But recently, Harvard Medical School contacted me at the end of last year, and they asked me to be involved in a study. And Harvard at Boston, I think, over in your country, and Boston, Massachusetts, I think it was. And they asked me to be involved in this study. And to be involved in this study, it was, you had to pass all these tests, and i.e. you had to have seen more than multiple UFOs in your life. You had to have video photographic evidence, multiple videos and photos. You had to have multiple witnesses to these sightings as well. And you had to have physical effects on the human body to be even picked for this study. Now, I was referred by some other person. They contacted me, and what they'd found was something about MRIs in the human brain. They found with certain people like myself who witness the UFO phenomenon on a regular or semi-regular basis, they found that part of the brain is lit up in MRIs that is not lit up in normal, or when I say normal people, I mean in most of the population. So there's this part of the brain that they don't know what it does yet, because the brain's a mystery, a lot of the human brain. Absolutely. We don't know a lot about it. And so there's this part that's lit up in MRIs that's not lit up in 99.99998% of the population, whatever the case is. So it's really, really unusual. Why is that? What's that got to do with the UFOs? Is that a direct link between us and them, or is that? It's very unusual. So, like stuff like that, it's got to make you wonder. Like, I thought at first it was they were trying to prove that it's us somehow convincing other people with our brain that they're seeing stuff as well, or that we're somehow projecting from our brain into the sky these UFOs. But if that's the case, how can our cameras pick up the phenomenon as well? So if it's just our brain projecting it, or we're visually seeing something that's not there, that does not explain how the cameras are picking it up too.
Yeah, and that sounds almost more crazy than something being in the sky. You know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah. So I thought it was interesting. At least they're looking into it, it's in scientific kind of terms, which is great. Like they wouldn't have done that, 10 years ago even, because of ridicule, or they wouldn't have got funding to do it, or whatever the case is. But now I think because a lot more people are open to the phenomenon and it's being witnessed all around the world, according to my calculations, UFOs are witnessed around every 5 to 7 minutes somewhere on this planet. Now, that's a lot of UFOs daily that are being either seen, or imagine the ones that are not being seen, So I do think that they're here, they're around us, they're in our oceans, they're in the earth as well. I mean, I've got them on video flying into the earth, into the oceans. So I know that and there's many cases reported out there, famous cases of them. And also in this area I'm in, a few people have seen these lights fly directly into the ground without affecting the ground at all. So whatever it is, it's highly strange.
Yeah, it's terrifying. For me, I guess, it's terrifying. Has anyone ever come to you in what you would assume to be official capacity? Because no one ever flashes a badge and goes, "Hey, I'm with such and such government," or whatever. It's never that. It never goes that way. It's always a kind of a threat. Has anyone ever come to you and said, "Hey, Damien, shut your mouth and turn your camera off," because of what you've produced and what you've put out there?
Great question. No, nobody's ever come to me, but I have had a couple of strange experiences. If you listen to the YouTube channel Unsolved Mysteries, recently they did a story about me where they claimed that the men in black came up to me and threatened me and my family, and they were going to kill me if I didn't hand over my footage. And that's just a big lie, just to sell their stories or whatever the case is. That's actually a mishmash of the other gentleman who was in Australian skies who had stories about men in black and stuff like that, mixed up with my story. But no, I've never had anyone threaten me, never had anything like that. Actually, the day after the Sun Herald reporters saw UFOs here on the property, they hadn't even written it in the newspaper yet. So they just sort of got back to Sydney. The following day, I was at the side of the house doing a little bit of work. I was up on a ladder and doing, had a work belt on and hammer and chisel and stuff like that, and scrapers, and doing a bit of work on the house and doing it up. And all of a sudden, a car has pulled up out the front here, and because we've got wide country roads here, and this car pulled out from the gutter about 8 to 10 feet from the gutter. So normally when you park a car, right, you pull into the gutter and get as close to the gutter as you can so that you're not blocking the road.
Now clarify that for my audience. When you say, because when we say gutters, it's on top of a home that collects the rain. But I think what you're talking about is kind of a drainage on the side of a road.
A drainage on the side of the road. Yeah. We call them gutters in Australia. I mean, the gutters on the roof too, so it's a double kind of thing. But like they've pulled up probably 8 feet away from the, where you should be parking, right? And they're basically blocking the road, but there's hardly any cars. It's only a town of, 600-700 people. And so there's hardly any cars that come up and down our street, very rare. And so it made me think, so I look around and I'm up on the ladder watching these people. And the first thing I noticed was the car was just a plain white car, and it had, it was a hire car, like a Hertz rental car, and it had Canberra license plates. Now, Canberra is the capital of Australia, where all the government is and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, that's really strange that a car... Anyway, so that wasn't the weirdest part. The weirdest part was the drivers were both wearing black suits, no ties or anything, just black suit, white shirt, and it was a hot summer day. And I'm thinking, why? That's just really... The day after... 2 reporters from a very well-known newspaper saw UFOs with me. There's these people that have hired a car from Canberra, stopped, and the creepiest part was the driver, who was a male, I could see him, he was staring straight ahead with his hand on the wheel, just stopped in the middle of the road, whereas there was a woman dressed in black suit next to him, staring straight at me with the window mostly down. and she was writing something, or she was drawing or writing something, and I couldn't see, but she wasn't looking at what she was writing. She was staring at me. And it kind of creeped me out. I'm thinking, because it was beneath, I couldn't see what she was writing on because it was beneath the car window and the door, so I couldn't see. And so I'm thinking, this is strange. Why would someone stop there and just stare at me? And why stop in that spot? You know, like someone can run up the back of you and, you know, and damage your car. And it was just really weird. So I've gotten down off the ladder and started walking towards them. And as soon as I got to the corner of the driveway here, they took off in so fast. They were kicking up rocks and everything were flying everywhere. They were screeched. They got out of there that quick, and they took off down to the main street down in town. And I didn't see them again. That was it. I thought actually I saw them cruise past again later, but I think it was somebody else in a similar car. And but never saw them again. She had blonde hair, like piercing blue eyes, just staring straight at me. She's quite attractive, and I thought, there's no attractive people in this town. What's going on? there's something wrong here. This ain't right. And so I'm like, this ain't cool. And so anyway, and they took off, and I thought, yeah, that was really bizarre. And that was it. That's as far as encounters like that go. I mean, I've had helicopters hover over the house while UFOs have been over the house. I've got footage of guys opening in these really futuristic-looking helicopters, black ones, opening up the door and hanging out the door while UFOs are hovering above them. And they're looking up at these things. I've got footage of a helicopter down so low over my home with a thermal camera under it. The guy opens the door up, sticks something down pointed straight at me, which I've got on film, and then goes back in there. It looks like, at first I thought it was a gun, but if it doesn't look like a gun, it looks like some equipment or something pointed straight down at me, really low, really clear as day, and then opens the door. And this is while they're hovering low above the house too, and then they take off. Now, who knows? Like I said, I'm not really into the conspiracy side of stuff, but that's the only two real times. No one's threatened me. No one's done anything like that. To say, oh, you can't, do this and you got to hide your stuff. But yeah, so don't believe unexplained mysteries. These guys have got over 1 million subscribers on YouTube, and they're telling just absolute porkies. Most of their videos are like that, they to get views, obviously. But, so yeah, nothing like that's happened to me where I've been threatened. Just, strange stuff with my internet, strange things with my mobile phone. The day after I came out publicly in the paper, that after the paper actually was released with my story, my friend of mine called me up and he said, what the hell, what was that about before? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, I called your number up with the area code in front of it, +61, then your mobile number, so i.e. people from other countries will call you up with the Australian area code so they can get through to your mobile phone. Now, he had that on his phone and he called me up. Someone else picked up the phone pretending to be me. And he's there talking to him going, Damien? And they're like, yeah, I'm not. And this person was saying, I'm not interested. I don't want to talk to you. And really angrily. So other people told me this too. So nobody was calling me from overseas. Anybody who was calling me was getting someone else pick up with the area code in front of the number saying, no, not interested. Not interested in doing a story. No, leave me alone. Stuff like this. And my mate said, yeah, it wasn't your voice. At first, he said, I thought it was you, but then straight away he's like, no. The more I spoke to this person and the more angry they got, he's like, yeah, it wasn't you, definitely wasn't you. I don't get angry. I try not to. But yeah, so little things like that make you think, just hey, what's going on, Yeah, like website being hacked. I don't think the men in black really would come and threaten you nowadays as such, because everybody has mobile phone cameras now. They wouldn't risk themselves getting spotted and then, being put up on YouTube, as the real men in black. And here they are, everybody. I've got it on camera, and, people have got cameras on their homes now. And so they wouldn't risk doing that. Or pulling you over in your car and saying, oh, don't you do this presentation, or I'm going to kill your family, or, whatever the case is. They don't do that no more. I think everything they do, at the beginning of this year, I had my website hacked, my emails hacked. I had everything hacked and shut down. I had to start all again. My YouTube channel, everything, thousands of subscribers, all gone. My name and AAPI, which is Australian Aerial Phenomena Investigations, I started up 8 years ago, disappeared off the internet. My association with it disappeared. So basically somehow, I don't know who can do it because I'm not really that good with computer internet stuff, but someone wiped me off the internet completely all at once within a week of my website going down. And it even said on the website that someone has maliciously hacked your website, blah, blah, blah. And it had this warning and I got screenshots of it and everything. And really strange, like stuff like that. So I think nowadays it's more of a covert kind of, shut you down, press a button kind of thing instead of coming out and threatening you like the so-called Men in Black used to do back in the day before internet, I think it was more of a hands-on approach then, whereas now they probably had the best hackers in the world that could shut you down, and basically they did to me, and the only thing, because of my drive, I've kept going. I started again. I'm starting a new website. I've started getting, a new YouTube channel and new footage back up there again and all this sort of stuff. So, they can do whatever they want, but it's not going to stop me. I'm still going to get my stuff out there no matter what. So
yeah, no, and I think you're right. I think that's exactly how they do it. Or it's always, I always tell people, no one ever shows up with a badge and they're like, "Hey, you need to be quiet." It's always this weird way of threatening you to be quiet, shutting you down, or like you described, the car showing up, or
it's like an intimidation. Yeah,
very intimidating.
Like intimidation from afar. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so now, look, I haven't had any to answer your question directly. I have not had anyone threaten me like face to face. It's kind of like behind the scenes, you're behind your back, or whatever the case is. It's more of a we'll shut you down and shut you up and make you believe that someone has hacked you and whatnot, and don't keep doing this or we'll keep on shutting you down. It's kind of that kind of feel, But I've had some strange stuff, but nothing. No one's threatened me. No Men in Black have come up to me, but so that's probably the best I can say about that. Yeah,
especially in America, the Men in Black might have trouble because we're all armed to the teeth. So you show up to the door and start threatening. You might be looking down the barrel of a shotgun.
Exactly.
I wanted to ask you, what's your opinion of the Min lights? I'm fascinated by that whole thing, and I'm not from Australia, so I don't know, the knowledge that you guys have from living there. But what's your take on the Min lights?
Well, the Min lights could either be a natural type of phenomena, similar to like your spook lights, like you've got over there in Texas and whatnot. It could be a very similar phenomena. There's a theory that, there's some sort of atmospheric reflection and it's just a train off in the distance, or it's cars off in the distance, and, lights are getting refracted in certain ways to make it appear a certain way. There's that possibility. I haven't researched the Min lights as much. I mean, as in I have read about them and I've researched them through books, but not actually gone out there into the outback as such and seen them. But the fact, what I've read and what I've heard and the reports I've received, they do seem similar and act in similar ways to actual just UFO phenomena, i.e. balls of light floating around doing all sorts of stuff. I think it's the same phenomena myself. I think it's these orbs of light doing their thing. I was contacted by a couple of police officers, I think last year, and they told me about themselves on a New Year's Eve a couple of years ago in a place called Orange, which is not far away from here. It's a couple hundred kilometres. And they were, doing their routine patrol at night. And, it's a country kind of area, but it's a lot, there's a lot more shops and bigger township than here in Dunedoo. But they were doing their routine drive around at night and empty street. Then all of a sudden they've rounded a corner, and then all of a sudden there's this orange ball of light just hovering above the road, about 4 feet above the road. And they stopped the car, watched it for a couple of minutes, and then it just drifted off into the paddock. And then just went into some trees, just slowly. It didn't care, didn't want to take off quick. It was just like, didn't care if they saw it, but it was aware of their presence. It was aware that they'd stopped. It was affecting their car radio. It was affecting their engine started sputtering a little bit. It affected, they said that they had their hair on their arms was standing up and the hair on the back of their necks was standing up. The hair on their heads was standing up. It seemed to give the inside of a car a very unusual feel, like an electrical, very strong impulse, kind of similar to what you hear in some ghost cases where people get these really strange feelings that actually interfere with your body and, cold sensations almost, but an energy kind of thing. And they seem to, they said that this thing seemed to be aware because as soon as they stopped, within about 15 seconds, this thing just slowly just started moving away and then disappeared. And I've had multiple reports like that from country areas, not just from policemen, from pilots, all sorts of people about these lights from all different shapes and all different sizes, I should say, of spherical lights, orange ones. And the majority of Min lights that have been reported are orange balls of light of different shapes. Some of them are white. But what I find fascinating about the Min lights, or the so-called Min lights, I believe it's the same phenomena, but they seem to be predominant, and red balls of light as well, predominant in cases of cattle mutilation. One of the cases a policeman contacted me years ago saw one of these orange lights, actually followed it into a paddock. It was hovering above one area in the paddock. He followed it into, and this was a sergeant as well, followed it into this paddock, and it just blinked out. It was gone when he got close to it. Directly beneath it was a cow that was mutilated. Now, he freaked out about it and for years kept it to himself because he was worried about, and same as his other policemen that have contacted me over the years, they all want to keep it to themselves because they're worried about losing their jobs, they're worried about their credibility, they're worried about their family, about ridicule, you name it, the whole gamut, the whole basket. And so they keep it to themselves. But it was something that stuck with this sergeant, until he retired. He said that he'd never seen anything like it. He said that the cow that was actually mutilated, there was no blood, number one. There was cuts around its face which seemed straight, like laser cuts around this cow's face. And this is one of the side things in ufology I try not to concentrate on, the side sort of so-called conspiracy side or whatever the case is. But yeah, I find it quite fascinating that, the reports I've received from people who, otherwise would be highly trustworthy and believable people in society, police sergeants, you name it, constables, all the way through the gamut, like up to lieutenants, who've seen military people, pilots who've contacted me. They've all seen something very similar that has absolutely stuck with them and made, and a lot of them tell me that, you're the only person I feel like I can tell because you seem trustworthy. I feel like I can tell you what, because you've seen, or I've seen something in your footage that is similar or the same as what I saw, or whatever the case is. Most of these people, though, will go to their graves without telling anybody because of the fear of ridicule. And this is another thing that drives me is, like I mentioned before, is to just try and get rid of the stigma in society towards something that we don't understand. And humans will always have or be scared of something that's unknown. We tend to sort of push it aside and say, oh, well, there's nothing to that, and get on with our lives, feed our family, go to work, do our 9 to 5, whatever the case is, and just exist, and that's what most people want to do, and that's understandable. But once you see one of these things, or something that just blows your mind, it stays with you. For me, it's stuck with me now for 32 years and I can't get rid of it. I can't do anything else with my life, it seems, until I discover or find out what it is.
What's going on? Yeah.
Yeah, what's going on? And I'm starting to realize the older I get, like I said, I'm 42 nearly now, and I've started to realize that, hey, I may not ever find an answer, but I am going to still keep trying for other people, for people in the future. So the ridicule factor diminishes. And it seems to be going that way now. And I think the internet's got a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You know, it reminded me of a cop I talked to one time. He said, "I've never seen the balls of light," but he goes, "I almost hit an orange ball of what seemed to be a light with my patrol car." And I asked him, I said, "Well, how big was it?" And he said, "Well, I know you talk about them being about the size of softball, beach ball." He goes, "This thing was the size of a Volkswagen." And he goes, "I almost hit it." And, and I asked him, I said, "Well, it sounds more like a UFO, like craft types, you know." And he goes, No. He goes, "This was an orange ball of light. It was no craft." And, you know, there's so much that I feel so honored to talk to you, Damien. I've wanted to talk to you for such a long time. I would love to have you back for a part 2, because I know you've been injured by the UFO or by the lights. And there's so many more questions I want to ask you, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I can't thank you enough for coming on. I'll throw links to your YouTube and everything that you have going on underneath this episode. But it was a pleasure talking with you, man. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Hey, likewise, man. You've asked me some really great questions that most people don't ask. So I really appreciate that. You know, it's not your stock standard podcast, and it was highly enjoyable. And thank you for your time as well, and allowing me to be on your show and to speak to your audience. And thank you a lot to your audience for listening. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again, Damien. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance to check out sasquatchchronicles.com, you can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.